Chapter 1231 Pulling. Pa Jigsawn's words were very tempting, but Zhang Yi was not some fool after all. He had experienced many crises after the end of the world, and every time he was able to turn disaster into good fortune, precisely because he was stable enough. It's a bit too simple to expect me to help you just by saying so, isn't it? Zhang Yi glanced at Pa Jigsawn with a meaningful look in his eyes. If you want me to help, you have to offer something of real benefit. Pa Jigsawn heard this and gritted his teeth and said, after the job is done, we can split the benefits 50-50. Zhang Yi laughed. Whether or not the thing you call the object under the Great Snow Mountain even exists is uncertain. Pa Jigsawn was speechless. But the things I can offer now are nothing you would value. Whether it is the resources needed for life or weapons and equipment, what Zhang Yi has in his hands is not just sufficient, but more than enough. If not, how could he so generously offer half of the Yuan Stone vein to invest in Deng's Technology's genetic project? There are too few people in Tianhai City, and most of them are ordinary people who don't need too many resources. Zhang Yi's mouth curled up slightly as he said calmly, you still have something that is very valuable to me. Pa Jigsawn's eyes widened, and then he gave a helpless bitter smile. You're talking about the main text of the King Gizer saga? The King Gizer epic has been sung by each generation of Tianjishang poets, but their versions are not the same. Coupled with the fact that the stories and legends contain elements of mythology, it is hard to say how much of it is true. However, the unique copy preserved in the Pa Ji family was handwritten by the official historian at the time. Even if there are some embellishments, it is still the most credible. Zhang Yi knows that if he wants to find out what those creatures in the underworld are, he must trace it back to the ancient culture. Pa Jigsawn took another deep breath. He was so fat that whenever he got emotional, he had to take a few deep breaths to calm down. I can give you another transcription, but you must promise to represent our Pa Ji family at the transmission of the Dharma Assembly next year. Pa Jigsawn said seriously. Zhang Yi rubbed the back of his hand and said indifferently, I'll have to read it first, and if I think it's worthwhile, I'm not averse to considering it. It wasn't Zhang Yi who was in a hurry now, it was Pa Jigsawn. Now that Zhang Yi already knows about the Great Snow Mountain, even if Pa Jigsawn turns his back on him, Zhang Yi can still go to the Great Snow Mountain on his own. With his supernatural ability of time and space manipulation, even if he has to travel from the distant Tianhai City to the snowy plateau, it will only take him a matter of minutes. Pa Jigsawn's face turned a little ugly. But at this point, he really did need help. If he wasn't forced to, why would he ask for help from outsiders? After much thought, he could only compromise with Zhang Yi. Soon after, he fetched another parchment from behind. However, this one was obviously thicker and contained more content as a sign of goodwill. When Zhang Yi received it, the parchment was yellowed but felt quite delicate in his hands. As he unfurled the parchment, he exclaimed, you had such good technology for making parchments 1,000 years ago, really not bad. You are a professional historian. Pa Jigsawn gave a strange smile. Treating sheepskin was very troublesome. There was no shortage of parchment, there were clearly better materials. Zhang Yi looked at Pa Jigsawn with some surprise, and the next moment, his movements in his hands stiffened a little. This is not parchment at all, it is clearly human skin. Thinking about some ancient rumors about the snowy plateau, Zhang Yi didn't say much, and with a composed expression, he reached out and unrolled the parchment. After translating with the intelligence system on his person, Zhang Yi was also able to read the contents of the scroll. After King Gizer the hero suppressed the demon kingdom, he established a great dynasty on the snowy plateau. He ordered the court historian to record his great deeds and sing them to future generations. It was a reminder that although the demon kingdom had been destroyed, the abyss had not disappeared. When the world came to an end, the abyss of the demon realm would open and the endless hordes of demons would reappear on Earth. At that time, King Gizer would return once again to lead the people in preventing this disaster. Zhang Yi's heart grew more and more alarmed as he read on. If what is written in the King Gizer is to be believed, then more than 2,000 years ago, the hero King Gizer predicted the coming of the end of the world. What is happening today is not a coincidence, but a kind of inevitability. Zhang Yi's back felt a little cold, but he soon came to his senses. There have been countless apocalyptic prophecies throughout the ages, and none of them have been consistent. And the King Geezer doesn't say exactly when the end of the world will come. If we extrapolate from the current situation, it would feel a bit forced. Although he thought this in his heart, Zhang Yi still couldn't help but feel a little shocked. He finished reading the content on the scroll, and the intelligence system had already scanned it, so he could watch it at any time afterwards. Zhang Yi returned the human skin in his hand to Pa Jigsaw. With all due respect, it feels kind of average, and there isn't much useful content in it, Zhang Yi said indifferently. Pa Jigsaw became a little impatient. The entire King Geezer saga is more than 20 million characters long, most of which are heroic legends about King Geezer. If you want to find useful content, you have to read the entire work. Zhang Yi stood up and said leisurely, I will think about this matter carefully. I will give you a reply when I have made up my mind. Pa Jigsaw hurriedly stood up as well. How long will it take for you to think about it? Zhang Yi smiled at him, that depends on how much more you can give me to convince me to help you. Pa Jigsaw had not shown much sincerity at the moment. Zhang Yi was much richer than he was. The patriarch of the second largest family in the southwest region needed to think about what he could offer Zhang Yi to impress him. Pa Jigsaw frowned deeply. He knew that Zhang Yi was the best helper he could find at the moment. Soon he gritted his teeth and said, Fine, I'll go back to Sarah City immediately. I'll provide you with some information then. I believe that will definitely impress you. Very well, let's wait and see. Zhang Yi appeared to be calm on the surface, but in fact, he was also a little tempted. An underground secret realm was a huge treasure trove, with both risks and rewards. If safety could be ensured, he would not mind taking a trip there. Zhang Yi left the place and returned to his residence. Everyone had already packed their things and stuffed them into Spirit Guardian's shadow space. In the corner, Fatty Sue was still propping up his big face, looking distracted. Zhang Yi didn't have time to wait for him to sort things out here, so he instructed everyone to prepare to return to Jiangnan. Chapter 1232, It's shameful to run away, but it's useful. Fatty Sue never responded to Li Yangyang's feelings. Everyone could understand, after all, this kind of thing happens to anyone, and it's hard to accept for a while. But time's up, and Zhang Yi doesn't plan on waiting for him, so he tells everyone to pack up and get ready to leave. The next day, Zhang Yi and the others left the courtyard. As they walked out the front doors, Zhang Yi felt as if he could detect a distant gaze watching the place. He wasn't the only one who saw it, Liang Yu and Flower also sensed it. Zhang Yi turned his head and saw Li Yangyang in the distance, leaning against a pillar in the attic below, looking in their direction with a complex expression in her eyes. He turned back and patted Fatty Sue on the shoulder, nudging his head in that direction. Fatty Sue has also been distracted recently. His head is a mess, like a chicken coop, and his beard is unkempt and hasn't been taken care of for a few days. He was awakened by Zhang Yi's slap and looked over that way. After just one look, he immediately looked like a startled ostrich, quickly hanging his head down and pretending not to see any of this. Zhang Yi rolled his eyes. After all, she is someone who is close to you, and she even saved your life in the abyss of the Qinling Mountains. Isn't it a bit inappropriate to do that? Fatty Sue muttered, I know. But now I don't even know what expression to put on my face when I face her. Zhang Yi was speechless. So you choose to avoid it? Although it's shameful to avoid it, it's effective. Fatty Sue argued. Zhang Yi shrugged his shoulders and agreed with Fatty Sue. Those who encourage others to be brave and face unexpected situations are social cowards or outsiders. People in the situation can hardly face everything with a calm mind. Sometimes evading is also a good way. Liang Yu seldom expressed her views on other people's personal matters in her daily life. However, this time, she said to Fatty Sue, no matter what your final choice is, I think you should at least give her a sincere answer. I know it all. Fatty Sue lowered his head and deliberately walked on the other side of the road, letting other people block his body. I will talk to her properly after a while. he didn't have the courage to say it to her face, and perhaps he would be able to say those words through the most familiar electronic device when he returned to Tianhai City. Zhang Yi teased, if those 2 words didn't tremble, you wouldn't realize how hard it is for you, would you? Fatty Sue's face turned as red as a pig's liver. Boss, just stop, fine, whatever. Zhang Yimin waved his hand nonchalantly. Before leaving, Qin Qigong and the others came to see them off in person. Now they attached even more importance to Zhang Yi's attitude. Respect needs to be earned, and the strength Zhang Yi displayed in the Qinling Mountains faintly surpassed Li Changgong and Han Zhanzhua. This was enough to make people respect him. We must part ways here, as we must say goodbye after seeing you off for 1,000 miles. After I return, I will discuss this with the leaders of the Jiangnan region, and someone will be sent to the Qinling Mountains soon. Zhang Yi said to Qin Qigong and Shang Daowen before boarding the plane. Qin Qigong nodded with a smile. There is no rush on this matter. Not long after the last expedition to the Earth Centipede incident, we dare not recklessly start mining the Yuan Stone vein. We will send teams out one after the other to survey the surrounding environment first. We will only start mining after ensuring that there is no danger. Zhang Yi nodded. That's right. We will discuss it again at that time. The Yuan Stone vein under the Qinling Mountains is very large and contains unimaginable energy. It is impossible for the Xinjiang region to do anything about it. What's more, this time, Zhang Yi has already excavated an extremely large amount of Yuan Stone vein, which has piled up into dozens of tall mountains in his dimensional space. So for the time being, he is not in a hurry. After bidding farewell to the people of Xinjiang, Zhang Yi and the others boarded the plane. The cigar-shaped F-37 flew out of the indoor airport, rushed into the heavy clouds, and then flew all the way south. Fatty Sue sat by the window, his chin in his hands, his eyes full of anguish and melancholy. A waitress came over and asked with concern, "Mr. Sue, are you feeling unwell?" Fatty Sue suddenly covered his face with his hands, bowed his head and said, "It's nothing, I'm just a little sad." Zhang Yi was looking on behind him, completely baffled. Those are all my lines. Shou Qian and Yang Xinxin, who were standing next to him, couldn't help but burst out laughing. Xinjiang City grew smaller and smaller in their eyes until it became invisible. On the vast, empty land of Xinjiang City, Liang Yang looked up as the plane gradually disappeared into the distance, and then lowered her head in silence. Is it still hard to accept? She pushed the brim of her cap down, then turned and walked away into the distance. The falling snowflakes drifted down on her shoulders and cap, turning them white. Zhang Yi and the others returned to Blizzard City first. Naturally, after successfully completing the mission, they first needed to give a report to Zhu Zheng. This was out of respect for him. The news of the mission's completion had long been conveyed to Zhu Zheng by Deng Shintong, so Zhu Zheng was especially excited today. After everyone got off the plane, they were warmly greeted by a delegation led by Zhu Zheng. As soon as the doors opened and Zhang Yi stepped off the plane, Zhu Zheng came over in 3 quick steps and shook Zhang Yi's hand firmly. "Chaos, ha ha, my Captain Chaos, you are truly a treasure of our Jiangnan region. I never thought that this matter would be completed so perfectly, and it was settled in less than a month. You are all great heroes of the Jiangnan region." Behind Zhu Zheng were Zhu Yu, Bai Li Changqing, Wu Di, and others, many of whom were old acquaintances of Zhang Yi. Zhu Zheng had specially brought them along, also wanting to play the emotional card with Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi laughed to himself. Zhu Zheng must have channels to know that Zhang Yi had 30% of the Yuan Stone vein in his hands. I'm afraid that later he will have the nerve to ask Zhang Yi for more. Zhang Yi exchanged a few casual pleasantries, and when he looked carefully at the group of people who had come to receive him, he noticed that there were many familiar faces. In addition to the mutants from Blizzard City, there were also many members of the Superpower Federation who had previously invaded the Jiangnan region during the Erosion Moon incident. These mutants, who were scattered all over the place and were responsible for maintaining local order, had all grown tremendously in the 2 years since the end of the world. Perhaps some of them had fallen, and new mutants had taken over their territory. But none of those who have survived so far are simple characters. At least 50% of the people who gathered for the first meeting of the Superpower Federation have joined Blizzard City. Blizzard City has grown even stronger these days, which is a cause for celebration. Zhang Yi said to Zhu Jing with a smile. Zhu Jing let out a light sigh. Jiangnan is too big, and there are so many troubles. The manpower we need is never enough, so we must keep replenishing it. Chapter 1233 Dividing Yuan Ore. Home is not easy in the Jiangnan region. This Zhang Yi naturally knew. The Jiangnan region was too large, with Tianhai City by the sea, and due to the conspiracy of Yuan Kongyue, it killed off the vast majority of Tianhai City's survivors. So now, Tianhai City is depopulated, and the power structure has stabilized, with not too many conflicts. But this situation is not the same in other places. The survivors in a medium-sized city can reach hundreds of thousands. Coupled with the relatively abundant food resources in the countryside, the survivors scattered all over the place are not subject to the constraints of the Jiangnan region. Therefore, there are countless small factions forming alliances in various places. Just take the several cities surrounding Tianhai City as an example. There are no less than 20 organizations of varying sizes. Just because everyone knows that Zhang Yi is in Tianhai City, no one dares to get close to Tianhai City's sphere of influence. Where there are people, there is conflict. It is normal for large and small forces to fight each other for food, energy for heating, and clothing. In addition, some animals have mutated and become fierce beasts that cause havoc. These are mainly wild beasts in some mountains and rivers. There are also vicious dogs in remote mountain villages and mutated cat demons. Zhu Jing, as the commander of the Jiangnan region, has reports from various regions on his desk every day, which he needs to delegate personnel to deal with. The position of leader of this region looks glorious, but it is also very taxing and not so easy to handle. What you need now is still an epsilon who obeys your orders, Zhang Yi said with a smile to Zhu Jing, and then glanced at Zhu Yu, who was not far behind him. How is your goddaughter doing recently? Has her strength improved? Zhu Jing said, her body has now developed to an adult level, and she has already begun training in combat. She is still one step away from reaching the Epsilon realm. His gaze was slightly regretful, but she just can't seem to take that step. Zhang Yi said indifferently, after all, she is not Yuan Kongyue. Yu only has half of Yuan Kongyue's genes in her body, so her upper limit is not as good as Yuan Kongyue's. If she wants to break through, so far the only way is to use the source of God. But of course Zhang Yi would not help her. If he had anything good, he would only give priority to the people around him. Zhu Jing clearly knew Zhang Yi's character. Instead of asking Zhang Yi for help, he smiled and said, never mind that. You have returned successfully from this mission. You have to stay today and have a good drink with me. And then tell me in detail the story you experienced in Xinjiang. The group of people enthusiastically invited Zhang Yi and the others to go back in. The banquet was very grand, and Zhang Yi took out a cup of hot tea from his bosom without haste, instead of choosing to drink. Zhu Jing and the others had long been accustomed to Zhang Yi's prudence, so they did not show any displeasure. It was just that the people sitting at their table were all important figures. Zhu Jing, Deng Yuanbo, Deng Shintong, and Tu Yunlai, the Minister of War. On Zhang Yi's side, only he and Yang Xinxin were seated. After toasting and exchanging compliments on the hard work of Zhang Yi and the others, they inquired about their experiences in Xinjiang. Zhang Yi glanced at Deng Shintong and gave a concise account. Naturally, he omitted things that shouldn't be said. For example, the powerful and mysterious Serpent people civilization encountered beneath the abyss. Even Deng Shintong Zhang Yi didn't tell him about this, and only those close to him knew about it. Even so, Zhu Jing and the others couldn't help but feel moved after hearing about it. Zhu Jing said, I never thought that there would be such dangers beneath the Qinling Mountains. If one day, the Jiangnan region encounters these kinds of monsters, what are we going to do? He let out a long sigh, his eyes full of worry. Deng Yuanbo laughed and looked at Zhang Yi and said, fortunately, we have Captain Chaos. Zhang Yi gave a small smile, not saying anything. Risks and opportunities coexist. The appearance of a secret realm in the Jiangnan region is not necessarily a bad thing. If it can be handled well, perhaps the Jiangnan region will leap forward and become a top-level power. Zhu Jing gave a small smile. That's true. If Jing hadn't obtained the source of God and the Yuan ore from beneath the Qinling Mountains, how would it have become the leader of the 6 regions of the Huashu Kingdom? When it came to the Yuan ore, Zhang Yi just gave a small smile and didn't reply. Zhu Jing ended the conversation at the right time. Halfway through the meal, Zhu Jing said that he was not a strong drinker and excused himself from the table. However, he invited Zhang Yi to leave with him. This was the time to get down to business. The 2 real power players in the Jiangnan region nowadays had a conversation that no one else was qualified to listen to. Zhang Yi and Zhu Jing went to the back lounge. After the 2 men were seated, the waitress poured them some hot tea and then respectfully left. The huge doors were closed, and the soundproofing here was very good. As soon as the doors were closed, it was as if they were completely separated from the outside world. Without any outsiders around, Zhu Jing's expression immediately became serious and earnest. He stared at Zhang Yi and asked, "Zhang Yi, regarding the Yuan ore, did Qin Qigong say when we should send someone over to mine it?" Zhang Yi's hand was tapping gently on the coffee table. "It will be a while yet. After all, the battle was too fierce, and there are still earth centipedes in the ground that have not been cleared. Mining also needs to ensure safety, don't you agree?" Zhu Jing nodded, "That's true." His expression seemed to show some regret. After all, he had longed for that magical new resource for a long time. Zhu Jing lifted his teacup and took a sip of the hot tea. "Zhang Yi, I heard that you performed outstandingly this time and got more than 10% of the Yuan Stone vein. Is that right?" Zhang Yi said indifferently, "That's right." He held up 3 fingers at Zhu Jing, "I got a full 30%. Zhu Jing's eyes suddenly burst with eager light, as if a greedy landlord had discovered the treasure of a dragon, and his body leaned towards Zhang Yi. 30%. A full 30% of the Yuan ore, this sky-high wealth, has finally fallen. He paused and corrected himself, "It has finally fallen on the talented genius from my Jiangnan region." Zhang Yi smiled without saying a word. Zhu Jing's smile on his face was somewhat fawning, and he excitedly rubbed his hands together and said, "Zhang Yi, you simply cannot use up such a large amount of resources. Can I exchange materials with you?" Zhang Yi had already thought about all of this a long time ago. He was just waiting for Zhu Jing to speak. "We don't lack basic supplies. But you can exchange weapons for Yuan stones with me." Although Lu Karen could make weapons, forging weapons by herself would ultimately require physical strength and supernatural power. Therefore, Lu Karen was more suitable for creating sophisticated weapons, but not good at producing large-scale standardized weapons. And this was not a problem at all for Blizzard City, which had an arsenal. Chapter 1234 Everyone's Code Name. Zhang Yi dipped his finger in the tea and wrote the number 7 on the tea table. "According to the agreement, I should give you half of the share, which is 5%. Now I'm increasing it to 7%. This extra 2% is enough to greatly increase your productivity. The Yuan Stone mine veins under the Qinling Mountains are huge in content, and even just 2% is enough to support the entire operation of Blizzard City for decades. All that was needed were some basic materials to make heat weapons." Zhu Jing was overjoyed. Arms were indeed of little value to them. Only Zhang Yi, who needed a large quantity of weapons to use his extremely energy-intensive skill Lord of War against mutants like Li Changgong, would need a large quantity of weapons. So he needed a large quantity of weapons. The two hit it off, and there was no problem with the deal. However, Zhu Jing was not satisfied. People always take advantage of opportunities when they arise, so Zhu Jing rubbed his hands together. "Giving us 2% more is really good, but you have more than 20% of the Yuan ore in your hands, and you won't be able to use it all, will you? Why don't we trade for something else?" Zhang Yi gave a deep smile and said to Zhu Jing, "Don't be greedy. Our business is not a one-time deal. If you have something good in the future, we can continue to trade. And I do have some use for those yuan ores. Zhang Yi did not put a limit on the discussion. He also promised to give Deng's technology 5%, plus the 7% for Zhu Zheng, and he still had 18% of the Yuan Stone vein in his hands. As Zhu Jing said, even if Zhang Yi installed central air conditioning for the entire Tianhai city, he would not be able to use up all this energy. However, Zhang Yi was used to stockpiling supplies for emergencies. Moreover, the mecha that Liu Karen is going to build requires a huge amount of energy. Zhu Jing tried to persuade him, but Zhang Yi just wouldn't budge. He had no choice but to reluctantly agree. Afterwards, Zhang Yi reminded Zhu Jing to prepare some manpower. They would need their own people when they went to the Qinling Mountains to mine. Zhu Jing nodded, "That's easy. Blizzard City still has no shortage of manpower." "But what about your Tianhai city?" Zhang Yi said, "Just send a few people over, but we can't afford to pay for the miners. You guys come over here." "Well, I'll take care of this matter." After finishing chatting with Zhu Jing about these matters, Zhang Yi had no intention of staying in Blizzard City for long. At this time, he was eager to go back, because there was something in his dimensional space that he cared about the most. That was the purple crystal he obtained from the Purple Pyramid in the mystic world. As for the Deng family, Zhang Yi did not go over to say hello, but instead reached a private consensus with Deng Yuanbo. After the Yuan Stone vein is delivered, Zhang Yi will use the power of space to quietly send them some. Zhang Yi and Zhu Jing came out of the restroom in the back. They saw that Fatty Su was not sitting at the table, but instead had found a quiet corner and was silently watching the falling snow outside the window. From time to time, he would exclaim, mumbling something about "since ancient times, there have been many loves, but only regrets, and these regrets will never end." During this time, Lan Xincheng also signaled to him that he should go to the second floor to take a break. Recently, Blizzard City had trained some new girls, forming the Blizzard City Song and Dance Troupe, which could perform for Fatty Su. But Fatty Su silently shook his head and refused. This surprised Lan Xincheng, who wondered what had made the fatty change his mind. Zhang Yi knew that he still couldn't forget Li Yangyang in his heart, but only time could heal emotional wounds, and no one else could help. After finishing eating, Zhang Yi said he had to go back. However, Zhu Jing came with someone and said to Zhang Yi, "Since you're here, let's take care of something else." It turned out that many people around Zhang Yi had participated in the battle. However, Liang Yu and the others did not have official codes, which was not conducive to future operations. Therefore, Zhu Jing planned to officially register them and give them Huashu Kingdom military codes. "This is also considered to have an establishment," Zhang Yi said with a smile. He called Liang Yu and the others, mainly combatants, who needed official codes. As for Yang Xinqin and the others, they were all hiding in the shadow space of Spirit Guardian and did not participate in the battle, so they were not eager for the so-called code names. There were still a large number of code names to choose from in the database. After some deliberation, everyone finally confirmed their own code names. Su Chunlei, codename Marshal Tianpeng, was indeed worthy of his name. When confirming this code name, Fatty Su was still in a daze, mumbling something about "since ancient times, love has always led to regret, and this regret will never end." Everyone just wanted to laugh when they saw this. Yu Jiguang, codename Lu Wu, a mythical beast from ancient times that was as strong as a tiger. Liang Yu, codename Nine Heavens mysterious goddess, a Valkyrie and female warrior goddess from ancient mythology. Even Flower, because of its special performance on the battlefield, has attracted the attention of several major battle zones. It has been given its own mythological codename, Cheong-Chi. Zhang Yi held it up and smiled, rubbing its head. The ancient mythological West Fierce included Chaos, Gluttony, Cheong-Chi, and Tao Wu. Cheong-Chi and Chaos were both part of West Fierce, so the code names of the man and the cat seemed to go well together. The name Gluttony belonged to the captain of the demon squad, Lu Wang. Only Tao Wu, this codename has not yet been used by anyone. The combatants all had their own code names, and they would be officially registered in the future. Subsequently, Zhang Yi led the people and declined the attempts of Zhu Zheng and the others to persuade them to stay, leaving Blizzard City and returning to Tianhai City. Soon, Zhang Yi and the others returned to Tianhai City. This time, they didn't stay long, but everyone was quite happy. After all, although this mission had some risks, they weren't too great. The combatants had all gained something from the experience, while the non-combatants had enjoyed the beautiful scenery of the northern country and were in a good mood. Back at the shelter, the snow had accumulated more than a meter deep outside the doors because no one had cleaned it. Fatty Sue walked over and used his ability to blizzard to blow away the thick layer of snow around the shelter, revealing the huge square in front of the doors. Zhang Yi got out of the car and walked over, using the triple security of iris, fingerprint and password to open the door. Once inside, everyone excitedly threw their heavy coats on the floor and then collapsed onto the sofa and thick blankets. Wow, we're finally back. After going out and about, it still feels good to be home. It's so comfortable, this sofa is really comfortable. Zhang Yi went back to her room and changed into some casual clothes, then came into the living room and sat on the sofa watching TV. There were naturally no new TV programs, but the electronic system stored a large number of past programs that could be watched. To be honest, you would never watch the same one twice in your life. But Zhang Yi prefers to watch some classic movies and TV dramas, which will have a different flavor every time you watch them. Everyone was sprawled out on the sofa, so Zhang Yi went over to make herself a cup of coffee with milk. Sitting in front of the huge French windows, outside was the howling north wind and falling snow, while inside the room was warm and cozy, with a roaring fire burning in the fireplace by the wall. The family and friends were gathered together, enjoying the leisure and warmth of the moment. This feeling was simply too happy. Chapter 1235, Keeping Earth Centipedes. Zhang Yi and the others returned home and did nothing but relax and rest for the rest of the day. It wasn't until the next day that Zhang Yi began to distribute the spoils of their trip to the Qinling Mountains. The first thing he did was, of course, to investigate the composition of the purple crystal that Totoro had brought back. Its importance was self-evident, but when Zhang Yi took it out and examined it closely, he didn't feel anything strange about it. It was as if it were just an unremarkable crystal that could sell for 100 or 2 yuan in a craft store. Zhang Yi had to hand it over to Lu Karen to help research what the hell it was. Lu Karen took the purple crystal and looked at it for a long time without being able to figure it out. So she began to activate her divine machinist abilities and carefully sense its internal structure. She closed her eyes for just a moment, and her body trembled violently. Then 2 lines of clear tears flowed from the sides of her tightly shut eyes and fell drop by drop onto the ground. Zhang Yi was very surprised, but dared not speak, for fear of disturbing her. After a while, Lu Karen slowly opened her eyes. At this time, her eyes were a bit confused, as if she had gone through some kind of dreamlike scene. Zhang Yi then carefully asked, "Karen, what's wrong? What did you discover?" Lu Karen's eyes slowly returned to normal, but there was still a sense of confusion. She shook her head and said, "I don't know either, I just felt an extremely complex emotion." The joys and sorrows of the human world seemed to have been integrated into this strange crystal. Zhang Yi was completely speechless. Emotions? Could it be that this is a memory crystal used to collect people's emotions? Lu Karen wiped away a tear and said in a serious tone, "Apart from these, I also felt that it contains extremely powerful and precise power." Zhang Yi let out a sigh of relief. "I told you, the treasure that Xinjiang region went to such great lengths to obtain definitely cannot be that simple." Lu Karen shook the purple crystal in his hand. It was very large, as long as an arm, and not light in weight. "Brother, this outer layer is the container, it should be something that carries the internal energy. And after opening it, you can obtain the power inside." Zhang Yi ran his hand along the bottom of the crystal, looking at it carefully. "You mean to say that the serpents use the square array to collect power, and then use it to collect? But how is it going to be used? It can't be broken by the first contact, right? That would be too dangerous." Lu Karen gave Zhang Yi a determined look. Brother, leave this to me. I will find a way to release the internal energy. Zhang Yi had no idea what Lu Karen planned to do. However, the military had already researched the technology to store energy, and Zhang Yi's firearms had such a device on them. Okay, but this thing could be very dangerous, I'll help you. According to Zhang Yi's estimation, the energy contained in it must be terrifying. If it explodes here due to careless handling, it could destroy the entire shelter. Lu Karen was of course happy that Zhang Yi was willing to help. Zhang Yi said, but let's do this later, let's take care of the other things first. Lu Karen's workshop is next to many vacant houses. On weekdays, she will take out a few of them and use them as warehouses to store her materials. Zhang Yi opened a huge room and released a large amount of yuan ore. Again, I have collected a lot of yuan ore this time, you can study it and find out how to use it. Anyway, I will leave the mechanical matters to you. You can do whatever you want. Lu Karen nodded, that's easy. I've studied Yuan Stone fragments before, so I know how to extract energy from them. Zhang Yi laughed, no rush, take your time. I've got something else for you. Zhang Yi led Lu Karen to the living room and called everyone over. Then he opened dimensional space and took out the corpse of an earth centipede and threw it on the ground. It was just the corpse of an earth centipede over 5 meters long, but it still had a strong visual impact when placed in the living room. At this point, the group was still shaken by the memory of this ugly underground creature. Yang Xia patted her ample chest and said reproachfully, Zhang Yi, why did you bring this thing out? Zhang Yi smiled and said, have a look and see if you can fry some dishes with this thing. Yang Xia rolled her eyes, the shell of this thing is too hard, even a bullet can't pierce it, how can we eat it? Zhang Yi sat on the sofa and laughed, no more jokes. This thing has eaten many Yuan Stone veins, it is different from humans, it can swallow energy bodies. To be honest, I have an idea. Upon hearing this, the clever Yang Xinxin immediately thought of Zhang Yi's plan. Brother, you want to feed this kind of worm? Is it like raising pigs? Everyone looked puzzled. What's the point of raising this kind of thing? Yang Xinxin pointed at the corpse of the earth centipede on the ground. It's like when we eat lamb. The lamb eats grass, and we eat the lamb. But humans can't eat grass first, so we need to add a layer to the food chain. The appearance of the lamb fills the gap that humans can't eat grass first. And for mutants to increase their strength, they basically need to devour the origin of other mutants or mutant beasts. They cannot obtain power from fossil fuels or food. Having said that, everyone slowly understood. Zhou Qir's eyes immediately lit up as she looked at the corpse of the earth centipede in front of her and said excitedly, in other words, we can feed the earth centipede and make it stronger. Then we can harvest its origin and grow stronger ourselves, right? As long as we have enough Yuan stones, we can harvest the origin of the earth centipede endlessly. Even. Her excited voice began to tremble. We can even cultivate a powerful army of mutants. Zhang Yi nodded with a smile. He crossed his arms and rested his chin in his hands, speaking slowly, that's what the Jing district did. Why do you think their population of mutants has exploded? Everyone suddenly understood. Zhou Qir nodded lightly, and this also solved the confusion in her heart. Supernatural abilities are also a form of energy. People eat food and become stronger. You feel warmth when you burn coal. Energy doesn't come into being and disappear, it just shifts. So why can't we find a way to convert other energies into supernatural powers? There must be a way, it's just that Zhou Qir hasn't found it in the past. And the appearance of the earth centipede makes up for that. Of course, Zhang Yi continued, the higher the level, the lower the energy conversion rate. To obtain an epsilon-level earth centipede, you will have to rely on certain special substances, such as the source of God, or something from the underworld. But raising this kind of thing will make it much easier for you and the mutants I selected in Tianhai City to quickly grow to the level of captain. Zhang Yi's mouth curled up slightly. The discovery of the earth centipede was also a huge gain for him, perhaps not inferior to obtaining yuan ore.